My business is making pots. You see, from early in the morning until dinner time, I throw the wet clay on my spinning wheel and form the pottery as it goes around. I make water pots, I make little pots for oil, I make storage pots, I make all kinds of pots. Sometimes I get some pretty unusual requests for pots. They're strange things. But you know, the wildest request I ever got was when this man named Gideon asked me to make 300 pots. You heard me right. He ordered 300 pots. Let me tell you about what happened. You see, these people named the Midianites kept threatening to conquer us. So this man Gideon brought together 32,000 men to go up against them. But when God saw how many men that Gideon had, he knew what they'd think. They'd think they'd won the battle with their own numbers and their own strength. So God told Gideon to send home any man who was afraid to go into battle. Well, 22,000 of them left, leaving only 10,000 men. But you know, God still wasn't satisfied. He knew that those men would still think they won the battle by their own strength. So he told Gideon to take his men down to the watering hole and have them take a drink. If they knelt down and lapped up the water like with their tongue like a dog would, send them home. Only the men who scooped up the water in their hands should stay. Well, guess what? Only 300 men passed that test. 300. But you know, God had promised to help, so Gideon wasn't afraid. That night, God sent Gideon and one of his other men down into the Midianite camp to spy on them. Well, they overheard the men telling about a dream that they'd had. In this dream, one of the men saw a barley cake roll down into their camp and crush one of the tents. Well, one of the other Midianite soldiers interpreted this and said that dream meant that Gideon would attack them and he was going to win because God was with him. Well, when Gideon overheard that, it gave him a lot of confidence. Well, that's when Gideon finally came to me and ordered the 300 pots. 300 pots. Well, I made them as fast as I could. I even got my friends to help me, and I pulled out everything I had in storage. Well, then Gideon gave each one of his 300 men one of my pots with a torch in it, and he gave each one of them a horn. Then Gideon divided his men into 3 groups of 100. And they all crept down the mountain and went 3 different ways to surround the camp at night. The Midianites were sound asleep. And at the stroke of midnight, Gideon blasted on his horn, and all 300 men did the same thing. Then they all shouted at the top of their lungs for the Lord and for Gideon. And then they broke the pots. Yeah, they broke all 300 of my pots. And the light from the torches lit up the sky. Well, the Midianites woke up so confused, and they thought there was a huge army all around them. It seemed like a huge army with all the noise. And they started running for their lives because they were afraid. They fell over each other as they ran in the dark, and they started bumping into each other. And Gideon and his little army of 300 men chased them all away, shouting for the Lord and for Gideon and blowing their horns. Well, when Gideon returned home after winning the battle, the people begged him to be their king. But Gideon said, absolutely not. God is our king, he said. The same God who gave our weak little army of 300 men the strength to face the Midianites. That's our king. Now, I'm just an ordinary potter. I'm way too old to be a soldier. But in my weakness, God showed his strength. Absolutely amazing. Well, you know, my extra supply of pots is completely exhausted. So I guess I better get this wheel spinning. You take care.